Hello and welcome to Superintendents Roundtable. I'm Deborah Vinsel. Periodically, we invite the superintendents from the 4 largest school districts in Greater Thurston County to come in and talk about education in our community. Today is the last roundtable for the 23-24 school year, so we have a few things to go over with our 4 superintendents. We're pleased to have with us again today Kevin Bogatin from the Tumwater Schools, Patrick Murphy from the Olympia School District, Deborah Clemens from the North Thurston Public Schools, and Chris Woods from the Yelm Community Schools. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here to kind of wrap up the year with us. And it always amazes me when we get to this point how quickly the year has gone by, because it feels like we just did this last week, and that was like back in January. So we're aiming toward the end of the school year here in the next 7 weeks, I think it is, 6 weeks. So let's start with you, Chris, and how are things going?
Things are busy. It definitely has been a fast-paced school year, but a lot of positive, a lot of good things. I feel very fortunate to be serving as superintendent in Yelm Community Schools. We have some amazing folks in the community, and we've I think accomplished quite a bit this year, but we have a lot to work on as we look ahead to next year, but really looking forward to it.
Okay. Deb, how's the school year been, and what do the next couple of weeks look like?
Well, this time of year, I feel like we have one foot in each year. We're finishing up this year, and we have lots of celebrations that are happening both already and then planned through the end of this year. Our board of directors is recognizing all of our career and technical education students who have won state championships, and so it's really a time of celebration. At the same time, we're planning for our staffing and programming for next year.
Great. Patrick.
Yeah, I would echo that. It's been a very busy year. This is a time of year when we celebrate and get ready to celebrate the class of 2024 and all those wonderful things. I know budget's on the agenda, Deb, and we'll talk about it later, but we've had some challenging budget issues the last couple of years that we're starting to get a little bit more clarity upon. And so, yeah, very grateful, like my colleagues, to be serving in the Olympia School District, and there's wonderful things happening.
And Kevin, you're just completing your first year, as Chris is, as the superintendent, so
yeah,
what's the rest of the year look like?
Well, I echo, it's like a whirlwind. I feel like, it feels like I was, just sitting here and just starting. It's been now almost a full calendar year since I started visiting not only the Tumwater School District, but the community. Have learned a ton coming in new, not only to Tumwater, but to the state of Washington. Feel super fortunate to be in Tumwater, but also to be surrounded by some really great colleagues who have helped really pave the way and helped just really help explain a lot of things kind of the Washington way, or maybe explain why we do things the Washington way. I don't know how the good and the bad of that, I guess, is how we look at that, and explaining some challenges that come with that, some on the financial side, but a lot, again, I would say mostly this has been a super positive year, lots of opportunities, and again, we can talk a little bit more about some opportunities looking forward, but I feel super fortunate to be in this seat, and I said, excited about this year wrapping up and the class of 2024, and positive things looking for the future.
Great. Well, we had a legislative session that has come and gone, and there seemed to be a lot on the docket for the legislature to think about and consider relative to education. So how did the legislative session impact schools generally speaking, and your schools in particular? So Deb, why don't we start with you on that?
So it was a short session, and I think what lawmakers expect to do in a short session is make adjustments to what they had planned at the beginning of the biennium, and I think that's a lot of what we saw this session in terms of schools. So one of the areas of emphasis for us is really advocating for more funding for our students that qualify for special education services. And at the beginning of the last biennium, there was a decision made to go from, I think, 13.5% up to 15% of reimbursement for school districts for students who qualify for special education. And this legislative session, they moved it up from 15 to 16%. Now in North Thurston, we still, as of this year, we have more students qualifying. We're at this point 16.8%. So it's not quite covering all of our costs. The reimbursement rate isn't covering all of our costs, but it was great to see that movement in the right direction.
Great. Patrick, any thoughts about how it impacts your district?
Well, similar to what Deb said, and I think we've talked about this before at the roundtable, that we have a higher percentage of students receiving special education services than many of the school districts around us. I was at a legislative conference about a month or two ago, and they were showing the districts in the state that would most benefit if they moved that cap up. And the Olympia School District, the brighter green you were, the more you were going to get, and we were super bright green. So we were very grateful that cap was lifted, because we have a very high percentage. If you count preschool, we're over 17%. That was a big plus for us. There was also, I don't know if you mentioned it, Deb, an increase in classified staffing, an increase in materials, supplies, and operating costs, which, if you've gone to the grocery store lately or filled up your car, inflation's expensive, and the legislature has not kept up with inflationary costs for materials and stuff. So all things being said, for a short session, we were very pleased with the outcome, and it helped us to make some decisions about our budget moving forward, going down the road. So yeah, I'm happy, and I'm very happy and proud and thankful to our community that went out and advocated and lobbied and really testified and talked to legislators. Our school board did it, and it seemed to pay dividends during a short session, which I don't think is always normal.
Yeah. Right. So were there specific things that impacted Tumwater?
We benefit from the same things. I think we are also probably more aspirational. I think we were hoping, because I don't think it does meet the needs that we have and that we see. It comes up, I think, it came up short of what we were hoping to see. I don't mean to want to be ungrateful for what the legislature did. And again, I'll appreciate that and the work that's done, and want to be clear that we are still reliant on levies to pay for basic operational expenditures for us to meet the basic needs for our kids and families. And so I want to make sure that is clear to our families, clear to the legislature, that is a huge component, and work that we need to be done in this bigger legislative session, probably bigger to the formula. At one point where I think both Patrick and I were aspirational, there was a talk of changing, or there was a bill that looked at the experience factor. So really, we have a pretty experienced staff, and there's a bill that was going to compensate for us, because we're already paying for those individuals, and some districts across our state get reimbursed for that additional expenditure. And ultimately it fell flat, and we didn't get that additional resource. So those are like, we get excited a little bit, and then it didn't come through. But there's other things that are happening in this legislative session, like guaranteed recess. I learned the other day, kind of a bill that sort of slipped through these things that we don't really see around, like 30 minutes a day of guaranteed recess, and some rules that come with that. You kind of think, oh, okay, just not, again, hugely impactful. We already pretty much do that for kids. But again, now to see it in writing and in a bill, and again, something that sort of, again, we've been in lots of meetings, and I don't recall us a huge lot of conversation about things like that. And so we're still learning about some bills that, again, we try to pay attention, but literally it is hundreds that kind of go through this cycle. And so hard to keep up on some of all that.
So I know that the special ed money also is a benefit to you too. I'm wondering, were there surprises? Was there, like you just said, guaranteed recess? Were there any other surprises that you kind of went, huh? So, and you can, fill in.
Yeah. I don't know that there were any surprises. I think, like Deb was saying, in a short session, it is a lot of cleanup, and I think it's also setting up for the next long session that's coming. And so, for us, I'll add to what my colleagues have said about the special education specifically, because we're seeing that need increase. We're seeing more and more students qualify for specially designed instruction. And so that increase was really helpful. We're sitting at about 17% of our students. And so that increase of 1% is definitely helpful for us. However, I think that number is going to continue to rise, the number of students that we see with significant needs, especially as we see a continued rise in social, emotional, mental health. I think we'll see more of that, in addition to things that we were seeing before around learning disabilities. And so I think that was really helpful for us. I was pleased to see some attention given to our paraeducators. We rely heavily on them to help offset, large classes, help be able to break down instruction into smaller groups. We rely on them for supervision. So I was pleased for that as well.
And could you share specifically what it was for paraeducators that came from the legislature?
Increased funding for us to be able to try to compensate them way in a competitive market. It's been really challenging to keep up, and so some dedicated funds to help specifically with paraeducators is nice. And then the last thing I'll mention is really the idea that I think we've got some big things to discuss next session. And so I think many of those conversations were either continued or started. And I think we've got a lot of work to do next session.
I can add, the way that the state funds schools is based on a prototypical school funding model, and they increased the number for educational assistants, which we call paraeducators. I do want to clarify, our typical elementary school employs way more paraeducators than what the state funds. So it's very dependent on our local levy to continue to fund those positions.
And I would say, and how many of your districts are prototypical? How many of you
Right.
fit the model?
Right.
Yeah.
I'd say one more thing about that. So to this cap idea. So if you have 10,000 students and they raise it up to 16%, and let's say 17.5% of your students qualify, they'll pay for 1,600 kids, but not 1,750 kids. So those 150 kids are not funded. That's not an option for us.
Right.
We don't tell families and say, hey, we're at our cap. So there really should not be a cap. If kids have a disability and they come to our schools, we are morally and legally obligated to serve them. So that should go away. The second thing I would add is this multiplier piece, which I think we've talked about before. So that's great that they're raising that cap to capture more kids. They need to capture all kids. But secondly, the multiplier that they use to fund kids' special education needs doesn't meet the complexity of the needs of our kids. So I've shared this before, and I apologize if it's redundant, but let's say that every student is a general education student first. Let's not just say that, it's true. Every kid that walks through the door is a general education student first. And apportionment comes with that kid. $10,000 per kid, I'll just make that a round number because it's easy. If they're receiving an IEP, then we multiply that $10,000 towards a fraction. It's like a 0.95 or a 1.05 or a 1.1. So if I go 1.1 times 10,000, that gives me $11,000. Put it together, I got $21,000 to serve that kid. If that student maybe has a specific learning disability or maybe needs speech language services, their IEP is not too complicated, we can make that work. But we all have kids, and to Chris's point, more and more kids that are qualifying for special education with really complex needs, that multiplier doesn't even come close. And that's why we're applying for safety net and other things to make up that amount. But that's going to be the next big fight in the legislature. One, get rid of the cap altogether. Two, that multiplier has to catch up with the reality that we're facing in our schools every day.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Well, just to share, in North Thurston Public Schools, for our levy, $13.7 million goes to fund special education services.
We were about 10, but since the cap lifted, we're down closer to probably 6 or 7.
Okay. From the levy?
Yeah,
From the
local levy that we're using, that's an enrichment levy.
Right.
To pay for special
Right.
education services. Does anybody think special education services is an enrichment?
Right.
So.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Since we're talking about money, let's talk about budgets. Patrick,
Yeah.
what does the 24-25 budget look like
Well,
for the Olympia District?
I think, like I mentioned, I'm fairly grateful for some things that happened in this short session. You might recall last year, Deb, we were in a really tough situation. Our enrollment was declining and still is. Our COVID relief dollars from the federal government were falling off. And all you need to do is just Google that and check out school districts in Washington State with budget, issues. It's all about a lot of those two things. And there's some exceptions around the table with enrollment, but you see a lot of enrollment is down, birth rates are down, The number one place where we're seeing a decline in enrollment is at our youngest grades. Our kindergarten cohorts are smaller. So we knew all of that last year, and we made some really tough cuts, almost $7 million in cuts last year. And because of that, we did some reduction in force. I mean, it was brutally hard. Our boardroom was filled with people that really loved their programs and music and everything that you might recall we talked about last year. And thankfully, because of those things, we were better positioned this year. We were waiting to see what was going to happen in the legislative session, but we did have, and I think most people are aware, a really robust conversation about, do we have too many schools in the Olympia School District for the number of kids that we have? We have 19 schools. We have about 9,400 students. Head count, probably around 8,900 full-time equivalent students, which we kind of know there's a difference between those two things. School districts that are our size don't have 19 schools. But it's something that, not surprisingly, our community really values their neighborhood school. So we made a decision recently. I'm grateful to our school board that we're going to keep schools open next year, in large part because our levy passed, again, at almost 70%. So our community really, I'm grateful for that support. I never take that for granted. And the benefits we got in this legislative session. And then we're going to make some tough cuts. And we brought those cuts to the board, and we said, if we do these things, and to their credit, the board said, I don't want to just be good for next year. I want it to be sustainable. So we're really trying to make cuts above and beyond just meeting our ending fund balance to keep us viable moving forward. It's hard, and yet at the same time, Deb, it's a real good time to get your priorities straight. It's a really good time to partner with your community and get creative, to go out and look for new revenue streams, maybe ways to increase enrollment, maybe ways to encourage people to come back to the system if they have left. So there's all sorts of good that's coming out of it. And at the same time, it's hard because anytime you're making cuts, people are, they feel it.
Right.
So that's kind of where we are. It's kind of a mix, but I'm grateful for what we have gotten, and I'm optimistic about moving forward.
Everybody has a particular passion point is what I call it at a school. It's like maybe one is the school itself, the other is a music program. I want my kid in theater. Hey, we need to beef up math. Every parent, everybody who supports school has that. So.
And some of them are louder than others.
Some of them are louder than others. How about budget for Tumwater?
Yeah, I'm super grateful our levy passed, and so again, that kind of helps. I'd say for the most part, our budget, I would just like to say pretty boring, right? Status quo. We're growing a little bit. We're building a budget that's really around status quo, kind of status quo with kids, status quo with our staffing, so not a lot of changes. So I think in budget, I think for all of us, boring is good. I'll just leave it at that.
Boring is good. Chris, what about y'all?
I think ours is anything but boring. Thanks for pointing that out. We just found out, and actually today I think it's being certified, that our levy didn't pass by roughly 240 votes. And so we have some significant decisions to make very quickly as we prepare a budget for next year with about $15 to $16 million less. And so as we've talked about those extracurricular and things that we view as essential to our program, we now have to make some decisions about what do we keep, what do we reduce, and it's going to be really hard. And that starts with reduction in staffing, where we're impacting people's livelihood, and we're impacting a lot of people who have been really important to our district and are very talented, and we're going to have to say goodbye to them because we don't have the revenue to keep the same staffing levels, and we're going to have to make some decisions around services that we've added in the last several years, especially around social, emotional, mental health. And a big challenge is there are areas within our budgets that you have to maintain: transportation, food services, special education, capital projects. I can't use any of those dollars to pay for the things that we're going to have to make some decisions about. And so we're in the process of doing a reduction in force, and that's going to be happening here in the next couple weeks, where we're going to be delivering notices to staff that they aren't going to have a job next year. And We launched a survey in our community for community members and staff to weigh in on other activities, programs, services that we provide to find out how our community feels about level of importance with those. And then we're going to have a community forum on the 16th, and then our board and myself and some others are going to have to sift through the information and make some very difficult decisions for next year and the year after, because the levy failure really impacts 2 fiscal years. So for the next 2 years, we're going to have to put this puzzle together and figure out how to do without many of the things that we believe are essential for our students to be exposed to as they are in school from preschool all the way through 12th grade and preparing them for beyond high school. And so really difficult decisions. I am pleased because we have some great people willing to come to the table and help us make these decisions. I've got great colleagues who have insight and information, and so that's been very helpful too. And I've talked with other colleagues across the state who are in a similar space, and so we'll get through it because we have great people, but it's not going to be without significant challenges.
So can I clarify a few things for viewers? Because we
Sure.
talk about school funding all the time, and it's an onion. You got to keep peeling the layers back because it's a
Yeah.
complex, complicated combination of funding. So so the levy that was on the ballot was a replacement levy for existing funding for operations. So when that levy did not pass, and you just said you had to plan a budget with $15 to $16 million less, $15 to $16 million less than the 23-24 school year, or less than you would have had?
Less than the
Less than
23-24
now.
school year,
Less
and less
than
than we
now.
would have had. Yeah, we in public education, we depend on those dollars to develop our programs. And so when it's gone, it's not that would have been nice to have. That was necessary to have in order to offer programs that we believe are core and essential and not extra.
Right. And one other thing I want to ask, and I've asked this, we don't sit at this table and talk about levies failing very often at all, because we've been doing
Yeah.
this program for probably close to 20 years. So I'm wondering, has there been, or will there be an effort to ascertain why people did not vote for the levy? And 230
Yeah.
votes, that's like every vote counts, but was it that they thought their taxes were going to increase, or the inflation is too high, or has there been that discussion, or will there be that discussion?
Yeah, after it didn't pass the first time, really, I think it was kind of a blessing for us, because had we passed it, 51% to 49, I think we would have moved on and probably not spent much time on the 49. And so we really went on a listening tour. Not only did we go out and listen, we also presented information to try to educate people on why we go ask our voters to approve a levy. So we did 5 forums around the community. We also were very transparent. We pulled some of the themes that we were seeing on social media, which often is a place where people want to share their voice. And so we were very transparent and open about that, and we pulled the themes off of there, and so we presented in our presentation the themes that were coming up on social media to try to be very open, very honest about the issues. And they range from, as we've talked about already, people are paying a lot of money for gas, for groceries, and then taxes on top of that. There's a point where people say enough is enough. In addition to that, there's a message out there that we're fully funded. And so if you just hear that message and that's all you know about public education, why do we need more? And so I think that's part of it. I think there are also people saying that, we want you to be more transparent about how you're spending your dollars. And so we've really tried to open up everything and say, here's what we're working with, here's how we're spending our dollars. And we think if you come in and take a close look, that you'll agree we're doing the very best we can. And I think it also, another piece is I think public education's been caught in a political crossfire. And people have made these ballot measures for public school something political, when we don't believe it is. We believe it's something necessary for our kids and for our staff. And so all that to say, it's a number of reasons, but we're going to continue to listen to our community and continue to listen to our staff, our students, and see what we can learn, because potentially next February, we'll be going back out, and if we're not able to respond to the reasons why people voted no or why people didn't vote, then we'll be right back in the same place.
So if you put a levy on the ballot next February, would that be for the 24-25 school year?
So if we put a measure on the ballot in February, we would not start collecting until the following January. So this levy loss impacts 2 fiscal years.
Well, and you can't go until every 12 months, so you can now not
Right,
go in
'cause they
February.
already went twice.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So you couldn't put, you can put one on in February. Could you?
We
put
could go in February.
Oh, you
You
can
could go in February. Okay, because that was the
next
initial.
calendar year.
That was the initial.
Next calendar
Okay.
year, we could go in
Gotcha.
February, but again, we wouldn't collect anything until
For
the
a following year. Okay.
And then the other issue is, what do you go out and ask voters to approve?
Right.
Because if they weren't willing to approve what we put on the ballot this time, which was less than the first ballot, so that's a difficult decision as well. Where do you go out and ask voters to approve,
Right.
and then how do we try to positively impact the no voters and or those who didn't vote?
Right.
We sit here in the in the shadow of the Capitol. I hope our legislators, I hope our state superintendent takes notice of one of our bigger school districts in our state, the impact that this has, and the reliance on the levy. Because again, comes someone new to this state, because that was sort of a message I heard early on, that with the levy being enrichment, that is clearly not enrichment. And so we're going to all get to see a community really struggle with decision making and the impact that's going to go far beyond enrichment. And again, I hope that others will, and maybe we can look at correcting some of our legislative issues on a bigger statewide basis to help correct this and not be so reliant on levies. Because we all worry. I mean, we all passed ours. But again, we have to do this again in 4 years. And I don't think any of us necessarily look forward to that, nor do our voters. But it has become the norm.
Deb, what about budget for North Thurston for next year?
So one of the main drivers for budget is enrollment, and our enrollment's looking good, very stable, and we do have growing enrollment at the elementary level, and we've expanded our transitional kindergarten program. So as we're looking at our total enrollment, the number one driver for funding, it's looking good. We did pass our EP&O levy. I want to echo what both Chris and Patrick have said, is that costs are going up for districts. So when we think about our budget, we're challenged just to maintain the programs people have become accustomed to receiving and the staffing levels that we're striving to achieve. It is a challenge. We're fortunate in North Thurston that we also passed a capital levy. And that capital levy is certainly for some bigger construction projects, which hopefully I'll talk about in a little bit, but it also is now a funding stream for technology. So in Olympia and Tumwater, they have had a capital levy that funds technology. We haven't had that in the past, and so we were depending on our operating budget. Now we can use this capital levy to fund the replacement of everything from Chromebooks to internet connections to cameras for safety and security. So the life cycle of technology is much shorter than other capital items, and so we have to have a revenue stream to replace those items and keep them up to date. I mean, we've talked about some of the increases legislatively that we received, such as special education, but we also experienced losses. So in North Thurston Public Schools over the last 2 years, we've lost $4 million from the state to fund staff salaries through regionalization. We've also lost levy equalization. In 2021, we had about $2 million of state funding that helped with levy equalization that we no longer will be receiving. So there's some complexity to how school districts receive their funding, and it's not always, sometimes we're celebrating the increases and then not talking about where there have been decreases. So we're really looking to manage our staffing levels, to have the predictability for our employees that we will be able to continue to employ them in the long run. Like Olympia School District, North Thurston last year really started to reduce staffing through attrition. And that helped us balance our budget this year, and maintaining those staffing levels going forward is because we've already made a lot of cuts.
Okay. So let's talk about projects that are on the calendar for the rest of the school year and upcoming. I'm kind of tossing this out there. You just mentioned you had some big construction projects coming up. Yeah.
Sure. So in January, I can't remember if we talked about it last time I was here, but in January we had our ribbon cutting ceremony, grand opening of Camachin Middle School. So looks like a brand new school, completely modernized. Over the summer, we're going to be redoing the parking lot, separating the bus, drop off from parent and student drop off. From the street level, it'll look brand new all around the building. So just have that one piece to finish up. River Ridge High School, which isn't visible from the street, has a brand new commons area, main academic building under construction right now. So a lot of good work has happened over the last few months that wasn't very visible because it was all happening underground, and now we see that steel going up and really big construction project. All of our projects are on time and within budget. We have recently improved the security at a couple of elementary schools with secure entrances. So Mountain View Elementary School right there on College Street now has a secure entrance, which means that as people come into the main entrance, they have to check into the main office before they can access the rest of the school. Okay. Same is true for Meadows Elementary School. And then the capital levy that we passed, last year legislatively we received some funding through Department of Commerce with some of our partners to do a conceptual design of a young child and family center. That's wrapping up, and then the capital levy that we passed will fund the construction of a new early learning center near Nisqually Middle School. Great. So lots of projects going on.
Patrick, you got anything coming up in Olympia?
Well, on the building front, our building bond from several years ago has kind of come towards the end. I mean, those were those big projects that we did at Capitol and Olympia High School and many buildings at our elementary schools. Our last project that we just finished up was at Avanti High School, which is a historical building, just recognized as such. So it was built in 1922. So anytime you're doing construction on something like that, you got to be very careful. It's beautiful. The district office used to be there, and it used to smell like 1922. And I would say that doesn't smell like that anymore. It's a beautiful, awesome place. And we've used that to put our transition program there and our special education program along with all of our Avanti students. And so that's going great. Our capital levy, like Deb was mentioning, we've got a lot of projects related to that, just improvements, not just technologically, but safety. We've got some vestibules that we're going to be putting into some of our schools that don't have them yet. And hopefully in the near future, we're going to have all of our schools with those safe entrances where you come in and you can't have open access to the school. We had a meeting with the city last night related to our capital levy that it's worth mentioning. It's pretty exciting. When we passed that capital levy, this was kind of I think a pretty outside the box thing to do, but we approved almost $2 million for safe routes to school, and really thinking about how our kids walk to school, bike to school, And could we actually do some of those projects not on our campus? Could we do them on a designated route to school and work with the city and partner on that? So we had some really good conversations about that. We're putting together a steering committee. $2 million sounds like a lot. Probably to most, it does to me. But when I sit down with the city and talk about how much it is for like 2 blocks of sidewalk, I mean, it just is a drop in the bucket. So we're really thinking about, beacons. We're thinking about pathways for bikes, not just sidewalks and things like that. But it's incredibly important, obviously, that our kids get to school safely. So that's something that we're doing on the construction side and the project side that we're pretty excited about.
Great. Anything going on in Tumwater?
There are some things going on. We have growing, and so we have the need for a bond, and so that's going to be down the road. And so in preparation of just to deal with some growing, we have some portable buildings that will be going in at East Olympia. And so again, we have schools now that are reaching almost 700 kids that we'll have, and again in portable classrooms that will eventually hope to move off that site and to build a new elementary school in sometime in the future. So we'll have that. There is also the need when you have a school that's growing from it probably built to be 400 is now 700, the need for more parking for staff, parking for our visitors and parents. And so we'll be doing a little bit of remodel of the parent drop-off, pick-off, and parking at East Olympia. And then most of our other capital, like our capital facility levy, is stuff that you can't really see. Roofs, some safety, technology upgrades, all that stuff kind of is an ongoing upgrade just to kind of keep up with the more current technology that is a bit dated. And so those kinds of things that, again, no one will see. Our technology works a little bit better. And so we'll see a lot of that. And there's some HVAC things, again, all behind the walls, things that just need to keep upgraded. And we've been doing those projects along the way. We are adding, for the first time in Tumwater, the transitional kindergarten program at 2 of our schools. So there's a little bit of work for us to get ready for those programs. I don't think we've really announced that fully to our community. We're looking at probably a January start. So we're kind of doing some initial work to get those spaces ready, hire staff, and then begin transitional kindergarten in Tumwater at 2 of our sites next year. So that's exciting.
Great, that's great. Yeah. How about Yum?
Yes, it's hard to consider the idea of us doing projects with a levy failure. However, as I mentioned earlier, capital projects dollars can only be used for
Different
that.
pot of money. Yeah.
And so we're on the tail end of our capital projects plan. We've got some tenant improvements at our transportation department, which have been desperately needed. They've been operating out of what kind of looks like a warehouse. And so we're doing some significant improvements there for them to make it more conducive to what they need. We're also finishing up, and it's almost completed, our riot-proof film that is on the exterior of all of our buildings. It's unfortunate that we live in a time where we have to have that. However, just as my colleagues have touched on, safety upgrades. We spend a lot of our capital projects dollars on things to keep our students and staff safe. Putting beacons, we put them all across the city at our schools, and that was something we paid for with our capital dollars. Updating reader boards, roofs, parking lots, all those things that I think people don't really think about. You just see that they magically appear. Right. But those require maintenance, they require repairs, and that falls on us to do that. And so a lot of little projects that we have left to finish out the bond from several years ago, but our community will see projects, and we're going to have to continue to communicate that those dollars are very different than general fund and levy dollars, because we often will get people saying, we don't understand, you're making all these cuts and losing positions, but yet you're doing projects.
Building a new building.
Yeah.
We have a new lifts, like those are projects that we do. Our transportation, our lifts that lift buses, hugely expensive. It's like a $2 million project. Those are just about to go online for the summer to be able to do bus maintenance. It's $2 million to replace those things. And again, they'll last for the next 15, 20 years, but huge costs. Kind of shut down the whole thing as we try to figure out how to operate as you try to replace those. And they have to dig out. It's quite an extensive project. Right. Again, most of the public, not only will they never see those, they have to trust that we're making those kinds of wise decisions on behalf of the community.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes left, and we want to reserve some time at the end of this meeting for Deb to reflect on her career, because this is her last visit at the Superintendents Roundtable.
It is?
Yeah, did you not know that? Yeah, the Good Ship Retirement is sailing into port, and
Oh, my
she is going to
goodness.
climb aboard. So I would like to give you all a chance to just reflect on this past school year and share some of those, a story or two that's touched your heart and lifted you up, because I know your jobs are stressful, and sometimes folks may not be really appreciative of what you do, but I want to give you that opportunity. I'm going to start with you, Kevin. So,
Well, I'll start.
Yeah.
I've been really appreciative of Deb. Deb's been kind of mentoring me as more in a very official capacity through our association. That's helped me. So we've met throughout the year, and just transitioning into Washington, it's been super helpful. So I've been very grateful to have someone like her come in, and a little bit bummed that she's going to be gone next year. And so I'll miss having her around. We come into the end of the year. May is a staff appreciation. I do want to recognize. We get out into schools, and we get reminded every day of like how special it is to work with kids and these great educators. I think it's yesterday or the day before, we had our band instructor, Andrew Lindowski, was named our Regional Teacher of the Year, a fantastic band teacher, band instructor, leader. He leads our band programs throughout our school district, and just an outstanding teacher. And so I get to see those kinds of things and be part of that. And I have nothing to do with that other than to just celebrate his greatness and wish him the best as he now gets to compete for our Washington State Teacher of the Year award. I think he gets to compete up against 8 other regional award winners. So that's the work every day that we get to see. And Andrew is in line of many great teachers and instructors and great people that we get to work with every day, and we get to name a few to get awarded like that, and there's so many others. And so super grateful to do this work and then get to work by people like Andrew, who are just amazing educators.
Patrick.
There's always wonderful things happening in the Olympia School District. The usual suspects. Spring is a time when we're getting ready to celebrate our graduating class. We have 4 student reps on our school board, and last year the Capital High School representative on the board had to decide between Johns Hopkins, Harvard, and Stanford. And she chose Harvard. And this year the Olympia High School rep is going to Harvard. So I mean, we've got some people that are just kind of low bar. They don't they're not really reaching too far to do things. We've got kids that are going off and serving our country in the military. We've got kids that are going directly into high demand fields and aerospace engineering and things like that, because we have those programs in our schools. And they're going right out into that world. We've got amazing spring sports and winter sports that just concluded. People are going after league championships. We've got wonderful music programs. Capitol High School got 2 musical productions coming up. SpongeBob, the musical, is at Olympia, and I think Mamma Mia is going to be at Capitol. So if you want to see some awesome music, you should go to see those 2 things. But I guess I'll close with, during probably one of the most challenging weeks, and there's been lots of them this year around budgets, you're talking about possible school closure. Somebody said, hey, if you get a chance, run over to Capitol High School. The ORF team is getting ready to go off to state. ORF. ORF stands for Olympia Robotics Federation. And the reason it's federation is because they love Star Trek.
Oh.
And so the name of their robot, I think it was the USS Stellar Star or something like that. The kid told me about it, and he said, oh, that's the fastest ship in Star Trek. That's why we called it that. And I said, well, of course it is. And so this particular competition, this robot goes and it picks up balls and it shoots them into this thing, if you've ever seen any of these robots competitions. And then it also has to be able to claw onto something and lift itself off the ground for a certain amount of time. And they can bump and fight each other in the process. And so I watched him, and this machine was fast. I mean, it was, the name was correct. This thing was flying all over the place, and the kids were doing it. The kids are from Capitol High School, Olympia High School, Avanti High School, all of our kids are involved in this process. They finished 3rd at state. They qualified for nationals. They went to Houston, and I'm going to mess up the award, but they ended up getting recognized with this innovation award that only goes to 1 school, and they finished, I believe, in the top 10. And when you go and watch kids that are doing that, number one, it's fun. Number one, you're building lifelong relationships. But two, those are skills that are going to really help them as they go out into the world about problem solving, innovation, working together as a team. And we have wonderful staff, obviously, as advisors doing that work. So that's just one example of lots of things like that are happening across our district.
You get to go last today.
Before, I want to say one last thing. Teachers rely on fellow teachers, when they're struggling with stuff. Principals call their colleagues up. I have felt incredibly fortunate to work alongside Deb Clemens for my 7 years in the Olympia School District. She knows I call her when I have something going on. I'm like, help me through this. And you probably see it on this camera. That calm, cool exterior, that's consistent. She, for me at least, she doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low, just kind of helps me walk through issues. So I will be forever grateful and indebted to all the support that I've received from Deb through the years, and I'm wishing her and her family the best as she goes into retirement.
Okay. Chris.
My story, I think, is in response to the adversity that we're facing with the levy. What's been really pretty special to see, regardless of how people voted in our community, and right now, that doesn't matter. What matters right now is that we come together and make some really challenging decisions and put this puzzle together. And so many people have reached out and offered words of encouragement, have offered to help, including my colleagues that I'm sitting here with, colleagues across the state. So what has been amazing to me is that regardless of how people feel about a levy and their vote, even the no voters care very much about our staff and our students. And so seeing people now say, how are we going to do this? And how can we help? That to me has been pretty special. I was in a fourth grade classroom yesterday, and they're working on fractions and walking around, and you could see the kids really working hard, and the teacher says, can we do this? And then the whole class in unison says, we can do hard things. And I just walked out of that thinking, here are fourth graders knowing they can do hard things, and so can we. And we're going to get through this. And, I mentioned my colleagues have been really helpful, and Deb being one of those. Deb is very well respected, not just in our region, but in our state and even beyond. And every time she has reached out in my short time as superintendent, even before this, how are you doing? How can I help? Thinking about you, offering words of encouragement, advice, unsolicited, but always appreciated. And we are going to miss her. And I can only imagine how her district is going to miss her because, again, she is probably one of the best and most respected superintendents that we have had the privilege of having in our state for sure.
Well, it's your turn.
Well, first I want to share that one of the best days of my career was when Erin Awada, board president of North Thurston Public Schools, I remember it vividly. I was driving my daughter, who was in 5th grade at the time, who's now finishing her freshman year at University of Washington, and their friends to a soccer game down in the Tri-Cities, because I lived in Spokane. And I remember getting the call and being offered the position of superintendent in North Thurston. And I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to lead really such an amazing school district. And I was thinking about, my husband and I do a lot of hiking and camping, and kind of the phrase is, when you go to a campsite, leave it better than when you got there. And I hope that as superintendent, I've done that for North Thurston. I mean, I think as superintendents, we know that anything that is accomplished, on our watch is a collective effort. And so none of the things that we've done over the last several years would be something that I can claim credit for, but in working in partnership with our staff, community, our students, and our board, I do want to highlight a few things that I'm really proud of. One is in North Thurston, we established the Family and Youth Resource Center, and it's actually under construction right now, but people are surprised to know that all of the resources that we provide to unhoused students or to families in crisis come as a result of the generosity of our community. So everything from gift cards to go to Safeway and get some food, to an overnight hotel stay, to socks and clothing and school supplies. That all comes from our community. But by creating the Family and Youth Resource Center, we were able to help the community identify with a location where they could come and provide support for children and families in need. We are expanding our dual language program. So we will now have 3 elementary schools beginning in kindergarten where children can learn both Spanish and English. And it's an immersion program, so those children, as they move through their elementary grades, will continue to have that opportunity. So really excited about that. Many of my colleagues have expanded transitional kindergarten in North Thurston. We call it Future Ready Kindergarten. And in North Thurston Public Schools every year, we have more than 300 preschool-age children who qualify for state-funded preschool who aren't being served. So being able to identify those children and bring them into a transitional kindergarten program, and it's called Future Ready Kindergarten, those children, by the time they exit, and next year they will begin their enrollment starting in October with a November service date. So all the way through the end of the year, when they end Future Ready Kindergarten and they take the WA Kids assessment, which is the kindergarten readiness assessment, they're ready. So it's just having that access that makes such a difference to a successful start of kindergarten. 2 other things I want to share. One, I think all of us have recognized that children need support for mental health. And in North Thurston, we now have 13 mental health specialists, as well as partnerships with community organizations such as Community Youth Services that provide direct support to students. So I expect all of these things to continue with the next superintendent and going into the future. One thing that hasn't happened yet, but I'm excited to watch it happen, is the construction of the Young Child and Family Center near Nisqually Middle School. So lots of great things happening in North Thurston that will continue. But I just want to say thanks to my colleagues. Your comments are very generous, and I really appreciate you.
So what are your personal plans for retirement? You talked about hiking and camping and,
and biking and just spending more time with my children who are now young adults. But my husband and I are both from Wisconsin, and we have lived for the last 30-some years far away from our parents. And our parents are at the age now where they would benefit from us being closer. So starting this summer, we're going to go back and actually live in our family's homes for a while and provide more support. So that's the big focus, is family.
I was going to say, I need a bus driver.
I don't think I'll be available for that.
I just figured out always a little recruiting. So.
Yes, a little recruiting, yeah.
Well, I want to thank you too, Deb, for your support for your colleagues and your service to the North Thurston Public Schools. And I will say, from a very personal perspective, it has been very nice to have another Deb at the table.
There you go.
So we really appreciate everything that you've done for our community and for the students, and we wish you the very, very best as you move into this fun, adventurous new time of life.
Thank you.
So thank you. And thank you all, gentlemen, for being with us today. And thank you for joining us. If you're the parent of a preschool child, please read with your child 20 minutes a day. It's one of the best things you can do to get them ready to learn in school. And while you're at it, throw in some counting games so they get a little bit interested in math. If you're the parent of a school-age child, please get involved with your school and your child's education. There are many ways that you can volunteer in your school, talk to your child's teacher or to the principal, or look on the website for volunteer opportunities and how you can engage with your child's education. We hope that you will join us again when we come back in the fall for another edition of Superintendents Roundtable. There will be one new face at the table, and we will look forward to welcoming them. Until then, have a fun and safe summer. We'll see you in the fall.